what are the 7 stages of spiritual awakening? And better yet, which stage are you in? Am I in? Which stage are we in? And is there anything, or are there any tips of things we can do if we're in one stage and we want to progress to the next? All great questions. That's what we're going to discuss today. So what are the 7 stages of spiritual awakening? And which stage am I in? And if I'm in a particular stage that might be a little uncomfortable, I can relate, or if you're feeling a little lost, how do you progress to the next one? Or are there any tips or things you can do to help get through the one you're in? Great questions, and that's what we're going to discuss. So I've seen a couple videos on YouTube about the stages of awakening, and actually the ones I saw, I'm like, I don't think that's right. At least that's not what I experienced. So just know that these are my interpretations. Yours might be a little different, but I think these are pretty universal. So the first one I labeled the call. It's that yearning for something more, for a better understanding, or that feeling like something's missing in your life, or there's more to life, but you can't put your finger on it. So that's, I think, the first stage. So if you're feeling that yearning, that wondering, starting to look around and go, this doesn't make sense, or even like for me, one of the things was I wanted to feel closer to God, but the God I was taught about in school and in organized religion wasn't the God that I felt was true in my heart. I couldn't relate to a punishing God, a angry God, a vengeful God, or they've eased up on that a bit. I might be a little older than you, but that's the God I was taught about for the most part. Anyway, so I really started looking, and I previous to that, I was unhappy, in a lot of pain, a lot of different people, different spiritual teachers talk about it being sleep, like the stage previous to the call is kind of like sleepwalking. People don't even think there's anything more. They just go through life, this is the way life is, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to make fun of them, but I was in it. I was in that space for a number of years, so I really can't point fingers. But anyway, before the call, I don't think many people are aware that there's something else or deeper meaning, or even the beauty that I experience now, having started to connect more with divinity and all the gifts that come with that connection. So that would be like sleepwalking. And one of my favorite authors, and a person that I consider one of my greatest teachers, David R. Hawkins, Dr. David R. Hawkins. He's a psychiatrist, but who also started teaching, wrote many books about spiritual enlightenment. He talks about the levels of consciousness, and he has a demarcation on that level, on his scale of where people are in more negative vibrations or consciousness levels, and where they go into more positive things. So like if you're stuck in grief or anger or hatred or the really darker energies, then that would be below this demarcation, and that would be sleepwalking. And Dr. Hawkins believes, or said, he's passed, but he believes that 85% of the population all over the world, at least 85% are in that more negative energy. So if you are spiritual awakening or already awakened and on your journey, kudos, because I believe we're all connected, and each one of us that is awaken to even a tiny bit of a degree helps raise all the boats on the water, like raise all of the consciousness. And that's what David Hawkins talks about too. So how do we progress in this stage? The number one thing is listen to this call. Listen to the yearning, follow it. Start to listen within instead of outside of yourself. When you start this journey, at least my experience, and many people that I've talked to's experience is similar. The universe, divinity, God, whatever you want to call pure beingness, pure loving awareness, will put in your path exactly what you next need. For me, it was a book called Emmanuel Emmanuel Speaks, and that was my first journey into spiritual concepts. And man, was it powerful, because I kept reading every page like, yes, that's the God I knew. Yes, that's the God I know in my heart. So that's the number one thing to progress in this stage, the call stage. Listen to it, follow the yearning, watch for signs, watch what the universe puts in front of you. I've heard stories about people being in a bookstore and a book will fall off a shelf in front of them. Look for that kind of thing and follow it. That's number one. Stage number two is the search, right? So now you've started to realize that there's really something else at play here in the universe. You want to find out more, you want to connect to it. So now there's this overwhelming, yearning to find out more. I took every class. I started meditating. I took meditation classes. I took yoga classes. Back, I'm a little bit older, so many years old. So when I started awakening, there was bookstores and things like that and spiritual centers, but there wasn't the internet. I know for most of you, you can't even imagine not having the internet, but it didn't exist a few years ago. Anyway, so I took so many classes, and I wound up, from taking yoga and this meditation class, I ended up studying Hinduism. And I just thought, there were things about it that didn't make sense, but the karma suddenly made sense to me, and other things about it really made sense. And so I really started following this one teacher, Swami Satchidananda, who is on the cover of one of the Beatles albums, the Sgt. Pepper's. There's many faces in the background. Swami Satchidananda is on there. Anyway, he has all these yoga centers, and the next step on that path is to ask for a spiritual name, like a Hindu name. And you're supposed to write a letter to Swami Satchidananda, and the head of the center that you're involved with sends it off to him, and they come back, and then you have a naming ceremony. So I arrived at the center on naming ceremony day, waiting to hear my name. And the owner, the person who met, like the head of that center, pulled me aside and said, "I'm so sorry. This has never happened before, but Swami Satchidananda turned you down for a name." It was very painful at the time. Like the ultimate rejection. I don't get a name, and everybody else did. Like 5, 6, I don't know how many people, at least 6 or 7 maybe, all got names. The bottom line is that wasn't my path. And somehow because I do believe Swami Satchidananda was enlightened. His books are wonderful. Somehow he knew, maybe from what I said in my letter, which was probably blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I got turned down, and I knew it wasn't my path at that point. So I kept looking. And I ended up with studying Tibetan Buddhism, which resonated much more deeply with my soul. So my tips to progress in the search stage is to explore, have fun, try different things, see what works for you, and see what really resonates with your soul, and follow that. Don't follow just because it's the popular thing or, whatever. Just really be okay with not being sure about something. Be okay with not knowing. because you've got to have that attitude to explore and to continue to explore, and be okay with being flexible and following the signs that will guide you perfectly to right where you need to go. Because that is what happened to me. It initially hurt a great deal that I was turned down for a name, but it was perfect in the end. So you just got to trust. That's the other thing. Trust. Okay. So then the next stage, all right, so you've explored, you've tried different things, and you've really, I don't want to say experimented like it was drugs, but you have experimented with different ideas and different things, tried them on, see if they feel right to you, maybe read a bunch of different books, and now you're settling in to what feels right for you, and you really start to get the concepts of spiritual awakening, and you start to understand that there's an ego at play. And this stage 3, I call the shadow. So this is where you do your shadow work. You've probably heard that. If not, look it up. It's where you look at the darker energies in yourself, and we all have them. You're human. Trust me, you've got a dark side. We all do. It's called being human, and it's because we have an ego. And the ego loves to be right, to be better than, feel superior, and it will do anything in its power to do so. All because it was designed a long time ago. I mean, long time ago. I don't think there's a year the ego came into being, but when we were, mammals coming up, supposedly, this is what some other spiritual teachers have said, and it makes sense to me. As we evolved, the ego kept us safe, right? So when we were like cavemen or something similar, very tribal, if somebody did something that others didn't like, they got kicked out of the tribe. Now they had nobody to hunt with, they had no protection, they didn't even have a cave to live in or someplace safe. They didn't have other people to hunt and gather, food. So they died. So consequently, the strong guy won, and the strong guy, the guy who was right, because being wrong gets you kicked out of the tribe. So all of these things became like underneath programs, and we don't want to look at them. They're these programs of wanting to feel superior, wanting to be right, wanting to win. All of these things are running, and no matter how much you suppress them, they're still running. So we've all got them. And as this goes on, as this part of the stage goes on, it can feel really, really dark and like you're lost. And I heard one person that described this stage, they called it the dark night of the soul. I personally don't agree. I think the dark night of the soul is a very particular time when you've been really experiencing divinity and suddenly that connection is lost somehow. And I think that comes in a later stage. But anyway, the shadow part of the path can feel really dark, and it can feel like a dark night of the soul, and you can feel lost. And the other thing you can feel is like, I thought I was a good person. What the hell? Like, I remember seeing these like things inside me that I had ignored and projected out into the universe, like other people are liars. And then I finally had to take oh my God, I lie. Like, I've done that. Oh, that thing where saying something mean just to, snip at somebody or nip at somebody. I've done that. I name it. Pretty much, I have a human ego, so I've done it. Manipulated, tried to control, all the things the ego does. So here's the thing. Here's a tip that saved me immensely. One is, you're not, it might seem like you're going backwards, like I was a good person and then I did this awakening thing and now I'm going backwards. You're not going backwards. You're just recognizing things you never recognized before. There's nothing wrong with you. You're just admitting to yourself reality and truth. And there are ways to handle these shadow parts. You don't have to stay in the mud, okay? So don't worry. You're not going backwards. There's a John Candy video where it's like, must have been from some movie, but somebody's put it together with these little, overlays of words, and it's like the spiritual journey. And John Candy's like standing on top of a hill and he's feeling all good, and all of a sudden he starts tumbling down the hill, tumbling, like really down a steep hill, rocks and trees, and he's like, tumbling head over heels. And then suddenly he grabs onto a branch and he like, oh, okay, I'll be all right. Okay. And then the branch, the little twig comes out of the ground and he goes tumbling. And suddenly like he grabs something else and he stops for a minute, and then he's just about to get up and he slips and he tumbles. And then he gets on a ledge and he's like, okay, all right, I'm done. I'm at a good space now. And he tumbles, the thing. So finally he lands, at the end of the hill, he lands and he's like finally stopped. But that's what a spiritual path can feel like. Like you've got it, you've got something to hold on to. Oh, then you're falling again. Oh crap, I got more shadow work to do. So don't worry. The number one thing to remember is there's nothing wrong with you. You are human. That's all it is. And you have an ego. And so we all have these shadows. There's a million books. John Campbell talked about the shadow. David Hawkins talks about ego work. You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm going to say you're not a bad person. Hopefully you're not. If you're an axe murderer, okay, maybe that's a little different. But if you're like me and like everybody else on the planet, you just have an ego. So there's shadow, and it's okay. So I think one of the most important things, again, is to understand, this understanding that everybody's got this. You're not alone, like I said. And the second thing is, I have found it immensely helpful not to resist what I'm feeling. So if I see a shadow within me, the last thing I want to do is shove it back down. Well, no, that's not true. Okay, let me rephrase that. The first thing I want to do is shove it back down, put it in a nice dark place, and shut the door. After that, when I actually catch myself and remember what happens if you try that, how it comes out sideways or backwards or in a very, not good way. I say, okay. And instead of resisting, I appreciate that this has come up to be healed. That's all it is. It's something within you that we all have, I promise, whatever it is, and no matter how dark it is, it's something we've all done or gone through or need to heal too. None of us are saints, so you're not alone. And appreciate its value, because it's going to make you stronger, more powerful, more whole. And there's nothing better than being whole. Okay, so that was stage 3. And my personal tips on how to get past and through stage 3. Now, the next stage 3, 4, and 5, I think are kind of not nebulous, but they can go back and like you can feel like you're in one stage, but then some more shadow comes up, so they can intertwine a little bit. Let's put it that way. Intertwine. That's a good word. Okay. With stage 4. Stage 4 is what I call the path. This is where you've become a little more stable in your understanding of these spiritual concepts. You've done a bunch of healing. You feel better and you feel more stable in your knowledge and integration and learning from all the shadow work. So when I started my journey years ago, I joined a group. I took a course, and it was very powerful. There was tools, right? You learned exercises or tools to handle shadows that come up, like the shadow work and different things. And I thought it was so powerful. So I decided, okay, yeah, the next step would be to take another course to learn how to teach this course, somebody else's course. And again, very powerful. But after almost 25 years with that group, it's a whole long story, and I'm not going to go into that whole long story now. But what I recognized was that was somebody else's path. It wasn't my path. So I think when you're in this stage and you're getting more stable, it's really important to follow your own intuition. And the more work you do, the stronger that will get. And I decided I had my own voice and my own tools to really help others, which brings me to how to progress in this part of the path, in this fourth stage called the path, which is to share what you know and be of service in some way. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean becoming a coach like I've decided. I've always loved helping people handle trauma, turn trauma into a gift. Like I've had the fortune to be able to do through various work that I've done. But anyway, that was my path. So there's all different ways of being of service. It could be working at a shelter or an animal shelter, or volunteering some time with kids or big brothers or big sisters, whatever. There's a million ways to volunteer and to be of service. And it doesn't even have to be voluntary. It could be paid somehow, right? I do coaching. I do charge for my coaching services. There's nothing wrong with that, in my personal opinion. You know, again, volunteering or something that is your purpose, either way. And being of service can be walking down the street and smiling at people, holding a door open, saying good morning with love in your heart. That's being of service. So there's a million ways to do it. I just know that doing something of service to humanity brings so much happiness. And there's a million books and videos on that too, so I won't say anything else. Then the fifth stage I call the devotion. The devotion is to the divine, to others, to the truth, to yourself, to your higher self, your intuition. And it's to doing the right thing. So I have a story about this one. I had knee surgery, knee replacement actually, and someone I know came over to help me, which was wonderful and gracious. I've known this person most of my life. And they came over to help me, and there was, I had major surgery. So it was the day after I got home. And there was a lot of issues with my insurance. Wasn't finding anybody to do physical therapy with me. I was trying to do physical therapy on my own. It was a lot. There was a lot going on. And at this point in time, this person decided it was the time to unleash on me and tell me 20 years of all the things that are wrong with me. And I mean, just throwing up, just unbelievable, vile things. Everything I've ever done wrong, whatever. Now, I'm not saying, some of it was right. I'm not perfect, but it was that moment, right? And I remember, I'll never forget, in that moment, as this person was verbally attacking me and telling me every bad thing I've ever done. And some of it was from this person's perspective, so it wasn't true. Some of it was, but anyway, my ego, my first thought was like, oh yeah? And you think I wanted to say all the things about this person. And it was a quick second that I wanted to do that. And I immediately, thank God, I think the divine came in, because I do my best to be devoted to it. And a voice or a knowing said, that's not what you want to do. That's not what you want to do. It will not help anything. It will not help this. Just let her say what she's got to say, and don't attack back. And I did it in that moment. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't say something later, but I didn't say something out of anger. I didn't say, I later shared that that wasn't okay to do in that moment, and so on. I'm not saying I was a doormat, but I didn't react out of anger and attack back. And I can't speak to how good that makes me feel. Again, I later spoke my piece and said this wasn't okay, but that moment was going to be vile things coming out of my mouth, and that's not what I wanted to do. So believe me, I have, for that one example of doing the right thing, I have about, I don't even know how many, because I can't count that high, examples of where I did not pass the test. So this example is not to make me look good, because trust me, there's lots of others where I failed miserably and was very human in that moment and screwed up and did say the thing I regret. But the point is, in devotion, you're devoted to the truth, and I think there's like divine wind at your back, and it's quite profound. So that's stage 5. Stage 6, I call the dedication. That's where nothing else matters but enlightenment or pure, like really pure divinity. I don't know about this stage from my own personal experience. I can only speak to it from what I've read. A perfect example of this is the Buddha. When he first, on his path, he tried a number of things. And, he tried the ascetic way where they ate very little and, only a few grains of rice a day, and he became real skinny, and he tried this other way. And then he said, neither of these work, the middle way, like balance. And so he decided to do the middle way. And then at some point he got into this part of the path where it was like all in, nothing will stop him. And he sat under the Bodhi tree for 7 weeks, 49 days. And when he first sat down, he said, I will sit here until I become enlightened. And he did. That's devotion. That's dedication, right? So that's the story of that. And little side note, the reason, I don't know if you've ever seen Buddhas where he's sitting in the lotus position and one hand is in his lap, the other hand is touching the ground. That's because he did that at the moment of his enlightenment, because there were maras, temptations, demons that were after him and trying to tempt him and do all these things so he would not become enlightened. And the one head Mara demon said, who are you to think you're going to be enlightened? And he touched the earth and said, with the earth is my witness. In other words, I have every right to be enlightened just as anybody else, and the earth will witness that. And that's when he became enlightened. So I love that story. Anyway, last phase, which I definitely do not personally know about, but maybe one day. And that is the enlightenment or ego death. Now, this is what prompted me to make this video. Another video that I saw put ego death at like stage 2. I'm sorry. Until you're fully enlightened, you still have an ego. It still functions. It's better. I'm not as controlling as I was. I certainly do my utmost not to lie, not to say an untruthful thing out of my mouth. That's a nice dress is a little bit of a, whatever, I try. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I still have an ego, as we all do. I believe it's at enlightenment that the ego dies, and then you become one with all divinity. I cannot speak to what that is or what that experience is like. David R. Hawkins talks about it in some of his books. There's the autobiography of a yogi. I have that book on my shelf. I mean, there's lots of books. from people I believe who really did go through enlightenment, and they can speak about it more. But I will say this, Dr. Hawkins talks about it being as much, your karma, your good karma, as it is grace. Because that's the other thing, the ego loves to do and fix things and figure things out and do and go, and it feels purposeful if it's doing something. And that's according to Dr. Hawkins, and I do trust him. You're not going to get to enlightenment by the ego. It's going to be through grace. Pretty much everything good comes from the grace of the divine. So I think to progress through these final stages towards enlightenment, at least what I'm going to go for, is to continue to work on my shadow, to continue to be the best person I can be. I invite you to do the same, and to, create good karma whenever possible rather than negative karma. I wish you